Let me introduce a 1949 Hudson Super 6 Coupe, arguably one of the most innovative shapes of its time. They have such a wild, low roof line and sweeping grace to them, and that was allowed because of a unique construction technique, at least back then, called unibody, which gave them a very low floor height and allowed for this radical body shape. When I was stumbling around on Craigslist and I stumbled into this car, I immediately knew I had to build it. I didn't even have a client when I found the car. I just fell in love with the car. Fortunately, a client who I already really enjoy appreciated it just as much as I did, so he jumped right in and we were off to the races. As with all of our derelicts, it started with us bringing in the original car, studying its conditions, documenting and scanning many components such as all the dash knobs, the underside of the body and the like, so that we could start to sketch up and then 3D model all the associated components. Let's face it, many industries today, especially transportation design, isn't really so much about the design as it is the business model, about Wall Street, about the shareholders. So ever since the Industrial Revolution, there's been a constant perversion of quantity over quality. But back in the day, brands weren't trying to come up with one thing that fit everybody. They were trying to come up with something that said something distinct, something unique, something that represented a particular design perspective. Then came Wall Street, then came the focus groups, then came the pencil pushers, and it's just been whittled down ever since. That's why I love building these ICON Derelicts. Then we media blast the underside of the car to reveal the bare metal to get a better understanding of the conditions present. Then we cut out the entire floor section, interfaced the body on the new chassis elements, and then hand-built the floor with Stone's metal shop to perfection. Once the vehicle was entirely built, with the exception of fluids and wiring harness, we took it all apart and built it a third time, just to make sure everything fits together and everything's seamless. It's really helpful to do the build that way. Takes a lot longer, but it adds a lot to the finished product. Before the body was reattached to the powder-coated chassis, the entire underside was epoxy primered and sealed. Then we did our signature polyurea heat-cured coating on that primered steel on the inner floors as well as the entire underside of the vehicle. Once the chassis came back from a zinc-rich epoxy base coat primer, which is actually intended for undersea pipelines. Then we did the black color coat, which is called Black Cat, and then we moved towards final assembly. The chassis was engineered by our dear friends at Art Morrison. It's a one-of-one chassis engineered specifically for this vehicle. Much more difficult than, let's say, the chassis on a traditional ladder frame, but really worth the effort. We're able to maintain that low-slung stance, but now we have four-wheel independent suspension. We're running a Dana 60 nodular third member in the rear with adjustable coilover shocks all the way around, and then independent front suspension, Art Morrison's famous sports suspension setup. For brakes, we're running the Brembo 6-piston calipers in the front with 4-piston calis in the rear, and that brake system is Hydro Boost assisted. This results in a very responsive pedal, and it can move a whole lot of fluid, which is perfect for what we need. For steering, we're running a rack and pinion setup by Flaming River. And for the engine, we are running the Ls9, one of my all-time favorite engines, and unfortunately they've now been discontinued and they're getting quite difficult to find. The famous Ls9 engine was originally developed for the 6th generation ZR1 Corvette. It is a 6.2 liter aluminum motor with a very unique 4-lobe rotor design supercharger, which allows the LS9 to produce copious amounts of power over a broad power range. Crank horsepower is rated at 638 and torque at 604. On our dyno runs, we were delivering 478 horsepower to the tarmac and 457 foot-pounds of torque. The transmission is based on the General Motors 4L70E, so it's a 4-speed overdrive, but with the burliest internals and larger planetaries, so it does a good job managing the copious amounts of horsepower spilling out of this motor. I'm not really a believer in 6 speeds. People always ask me, why aren't you running a 6-speed? Because it's just 2 more gears to shift through, 2 more things that can brake, and in the end of the day, you're not getting any benefits in the performance. All you're getting is the OEM benefiting from better fuel efficiency on paper, which allows them to put off actually engineering the mechanical system of the motor to be more efficient. So I don't know, I've done a couple 6-speed builds, but I prefer the 4s. The exhaust system is built in 2.5-inch stainless steel. It's all mandrel bent and ceramic coated. It's bridged in the middle, so you get a nice muffled, quiet, balanced exhaust tone. But when you stomp on it, it really comes to life. So, as you know, we always work really hard to keep a vintage wheel aesthetic while dealing with the engineering constraints of these super large Brembos and wanting to fit a high-performance sticky ZR-rated tire. So this is running the ICON forged aluminum wheels. They're 18 inches, and we ran a staggered setup of Goodyear Eagle RSAs. So in the front, we're running 235/50 18s. In the rear, we're running 245/55 18s. And then the wheels were patina painted in this sort of funky modded black and gray setup to match the original paint on the body. The hubcaps are actually the original hubcaps that have been with the car since it was born. Did the four-wheel independent suspension, that required us reshaping the entire floor. In fact, we replaced the floor front to back because of the condition. There was a lot of surprise rust hiding down there, but it also allowed us to maximize the ergonomics and take advantage of every nook and cranny. So this is a false firewall behind which we are hiding electronics, amplifier, bass speakers, as well as this is part of the dry sump system for the LS9. So all super sexy, high-end, US-made aerospace AN fittings, stainless plumbing when it's a hard line. This is all OEM or better, and then that's fluted into the body, through the pan, and back out in the engine bay. The battery's back here, so we created these post covers. If you come back over here, stupid little detail, but kind of fun, we did these little brushes so you can protect the hinge point, try and keep stuff clean on the inside. For the fuse panel, the wiring system, of course, is all new and designed by us. We're using Bussmann or Packard or all the OEM fittings that are triple seal connection and all cross-link wire. To the left of the fuse panel is a master dead switch. Fuel system, of course, brand new stainless steel tank of our design and manufacture. We created this access plate, so when you have to deal with your fuel pump one day, you're not dropping your tank, you're just pulling the plate and then everybody comes up. And then another issue we have oftentimes with these earlier cars is, actually even into the 70s, is they can't take the modern fuel pump fill rate. So the tank was designed with that in mind, as well as it has internal baffles, the internal OEM fuel pump and all that goodness, but also the actual architecture and design of the fill neck has been completely rethought to keep up with the modern fill. You'll notice a tank hiding in this quarter panel, and that's an expansion tank for the fuel system as well. All of those changes to the way the fuel system was engineered allows us to keep old school until you're inside. So modern sealed fuel cap isn't the sexiest looking thing, but it's hidden. But again, that let us keep the exterior of the vehicle dead clean and stock. I guess the original owner of this car was a little J.C. Whitney happy, because this thing had all sorts of accessories, some cool, some silly, and some silly cool. So this is not stock for this vehicle. This is an old period piece, an aftermarket. Turn signals and third brake light, I suppose you could wire it either way. They're single filament bulbs, so we did it LED and we connected these to the turn signals. Reverse lights, super groovy. These are a guide light, so these may have actually been a factory accessory because the original single red gas lenses did not give you reverse, but these work cool. We upgraded them with modern internal optics, LED, but we left the original housing and glass over plastic any day. Car also came with an old spotlight, which we thought was super groovy. So we didn't really alter it visually. Again, we kept the original housing and everything, but then we modified the optics. So it really blasts a pretty good amount of light and just kind of cool. They have like a neat period funk to them. More grace in the front and tons of subtle mods that are hard to catch immediately. We stayed with a halogen H4 by Hella. I like using these on the real early cars instead of the light emitting diodes because they're just, I don't know, they jump the shark visually, but these are glass in keeping with the original quality and theme and really give you some good lighting. It's interesting, up here in the front, there's so many bars and thingamajiggers going on. When we got the car, again, the guy was a bit accessory happy, so there was actually another tower of bumper guards with another horizontal bar up in the front, and it just looked wrong. But when I actually did the research, it was an accessory on the cars back in the day. I just didn't get it, and it looked like poo. So we took it off so you could see more of the horizontal details up here in the front. We also removed the wing bar that goes down here because I couldn't make it up my driveway if I left it, but still on the fence, we might put it back on. You might notice our elaborate craftsmanship via duct tape. Actually, I can't take credit for that. That was on the car when it came to us, and it's hiding a big, ugly, like, chisel hole. But I think it's kind of fun. It's kind of part of the funk, part of the charm, so we just left it. It's good to go. So lighting and more, let's talk about the dash. These have such a cool dash, and I think Hudson was probably one of the best American manufacturers at painted steel to have the look of wood. The patina on it and everything literally looks like wood, how it's patinaed. You know, people have been polishing away over the years. The ICON Lizard, as you know, changes. We put them in all sorts of different spots depending on the build, and it's kind of up to the Lizard. In this case, this seemed like a really good spot. You got such a raked windshield. He gets to bask in the sun there, and he's got a killer view. The original rearview mirror was maintained, even all the patina and cracks, because it still works great. It's just the foil on the backside that's starting to age like an antique mirror. So the functionality is there, but it just had that style and vibe. This front light is original, again updated to LED. This is the Bakelite control for the antenna, which is kind of silly. Doesn't do anything anymore, but it looks cool, so we left it. I'm a sucker for Bakelite. As you move into the main body of the dash, this has been extensively modified, but it's hard to see, which was the goal. So, this is stock, this is stock, this is stock, this is stock, that's stock, and this old school Hudson, this would hold your Kleenex tissue brand, which I wonder if the modern size even fits. This is a really interesting piece. So stock, this was just one piece, and then there were knobs, but of varying design, and they were not all evenly on the horizontal plane, which just killed me. However, the audio knobs with these cool little details, I really like the shape and design of that. That design was repeated on a couple of these knobs, but not all of them. So we CNC'd this entire piece in steel and then chromed it. We did that because I wanted to keep the vintage vibe, but I wanted to add all the functionality that we need to support. Now, in all honesty, I'm not really 100% happy. After this video, I'm redoing it. I screwed up the CAD files on these knobs, and it's hard to notice until I just like an idiot pointed it out to you, but their scale is a little bit off, and the rake of the dome, the radius varies, so whoopsies. But since I have to redo them anyway, I don't like this ivory white that we did. So we're going to machine those and leave them raw, and then I'm going to have our patina artist give it the vintage effect of the worn Bakelite. I think that's going to look a lot cooler. And then I don't know, I might infill, I don't know. So you have headlights, fan, vent, temperature, and wiper. These AC vents, again, always a challenge on a classic, but I didn't want some modern mail order catalog vent screwing up the grace and balance of this dash. So I designed this shape taking inspiration from the spears on the glove box door and on the left hand side. So it still has that form, terminates, these flow better in the middle, and then we 3D printed a reinforced polymer with laser cut stainless control. So now you have directionable louvers, which is something we rarely do. It's a lot more complex, but now that we've figured out the CAD model on that, I think you're going to expect to see it on more and more builds. This right here is the stock cal vent control. That's left all alone. Steering column is by our partners at I Did It. So it's a collapsible tilt column. You'll note we have patina painted it, so it flowed with the rest of the vehicle. And what about that steering wheel? Unbelievable. So this would have been an optional wheel on a Hornet or one of the highest trim level vehicles back in the day. This was actually a pretty low level trim vehicle, and the original wheel was nice, but once I discovered that these happened, we had to do it. So we went ahead and reduced the diameter of the wheel by scanning the original and then modifying the CAD file, then creating the molds and having the acrylic poured. So this has this wonderful kind of luminescent pearl situation going. Horn ring, stock, color was killer, patina was perfect, unrestored, left it alone. Other details on the column, you'll notice that the transmission control knob, as well as turn signal, tilt, and even the little hazards knob have all been redesigned again in chorus with the original knob that inspired everything else we did on the dash. Since I'm pointing at that ever so nifty radio, the radio is designed again to look dead stock. It does illuminate like it is going to work, and it actually does work. What happens now is you hit any memory preset button, that excites the Bluetooth signal, and then you control system volume from the knob on the left, and from the knob on the right, you control specifically the bass output. And then that's all fed through a digital sound processor paired up with focal audio speakers and JL audio amp and bass. Stereo rocks, but again, didn't want it to jump the shark, so it did not change the visual. And the technology on audio changes so quickly, especially head units. More and more I like to run these Bluetooth dependent systems, so you always update your phone, you're not having to screw with your vehicle. This little bejeweled piece right here is again not stock, nor is this. This beautiful gauge with this kind of neon effect that's on all these gauges actually is stock, but again, the internal workings have been modified, so it's all circuit board driven, vehicle speed signal driven, no capillary tubes or any of that old nonsense, quartz clock. These jewels now are for check engine and for oil pressure, and that obnoxious beeping you're hearing is for the parking brake. So you'll notice I kept the original parking brake handle, but we interfaced that with an e-stop electric parking brake system. It's often quite difficult to get the fulcrum point mechanical leverage you want for a modern brake caliper enabled parking brake, but with the e-stop you're getting a worm gear that's really putting a lot of pressure and holds things nice and tight. The audible tone, while annoying, is very helpful. It reminds you, hey idiot, you left your parking brake on, as does this vintage aerospace salvage part we got for Jewel. For the key, this is actually a Toyota Land Cruiser part, but I've always liked them. So when we designed this piece, we made it so you could fit a 95 to 97 FZJ80 ignition key housing ring, which is what gives us the illumination. And then we went with our usual ICON ignition switch. We didn't do power windows on this one. We did manual. Client liked that mechanical interface. Fine with me. And we did do power door locks because no one likes dealing with that. Cool are these opera lights. Love them. We just changed the LED bulb, 4/0 steel wool, polished them, and partied on. And again, quality, 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 all the way down to a glass lens, which you just gotta love. More details on the audio system. So the idea was, again, non-invasive, but needs to pump, because the whole point of this ride is to enjoy Nashville. So it's going to live in Nashville. It's going to do a fair amount of bar hopping and musical scene situations. So I once owned a 37 Lincoln Zephyr. In the trunk of that Zephyr was a single speaker grill that was just too cool. So it had the music note, it was cast aluminum, but it only had one. So what I did was, when we started this car and I knew we were going to go down that rockabilly theme, I went to the client and said, come on, look at this thing. It's just too cool, isn't it? Fortunately, he's a geek and he agreed with me. So we employed this cool business in downtown Los Angeles. Third generation, they do just sand casting, just aluminum. So we took that original piece and we had it cast. And it's just so cool. So I went ahead and made a dozen of these, so I have some spares. But they just had such a great vibe to them. And we modified the layout so they were compliant with the modern speakers, but it's just such a cool look. Now, what is that directly next to that speaker grill, you may be wondering? Is that fake alligator? The answer is no, sir, it is not fake alligator. This is sustainable, wild-caught American alligator. So those of you that follow my antics on Instagram know I am a bit of a leathercraft geek. So I've been studying from the masters in different techniques ranging from like Western tooling to early European staining. Everything I do is hand burnished, hand stitched, hand dyed, hand stained, blah, blah, blah. So this started as crust alligator, meaning it had been through the majority of the tanning process, but no pigments or oils were reintroduced. So it literally starts bright white. Then we did a technique that Hermes used to do, and they in fact today still own the company that provides the system, but it's a variety of organic pigments that you use, and they're in different suspensions, and each suspension creates a different effect. We literally hand painted every single tile of every alligator to create this interior. Now it looks like it's blue. It's kind of blue, but it's blue, copper, brown, orange, red, and black, so that we could create more patina and more funk and more surface variation. And then last coat is like a blue-green wash that we do. So you'll see there's just so much character in the surface, and the effect is just entirely unique every single time. It's its own creation, and it's really been fun to do. So I brought in my friend Kathleen. She's an expert in this, and we did a little bit of video, so here you can see the process as it was happening.
Actually use a gray wash as a base and then go over with a mixture of blue, green, and red, which I know it doesn't maybe look like it, but this leather isn't exactly just navy blue. There's a lot more colors in it. So color matching is probably the trickiest part.
And check this out. I love these back seat, oh my gosh, handles. I don't know why you'd use it in the original one except to pull yourself out of the car, but then why would you do that? Because you're going to rotate the seat forward when you get out of the car. Doesn't matter. We created a reason for it by having about 500 horsepower hitting the tarmac, so it's your yeehaw handle. So we did a climbing rope in here, and then we took trimming of our leather and we skived it down a bit thinner and then hand wove it to create the grab handle, while the steel hardware is original to the car. Again, you'll notice a transition. So you have all this patina and what they call a Himalaya style, where you've got a color bleed fade on all of the hardback panels. That also continues through with the alligator for the door panel inserts, the rear quarter inserts, but then the upper band of leather, the door handle, the lower section, and the main seat bodies are all done in a special Moore & Jales leather that we had tanned our specifications in that kind of funky blue green. For the headliner, we stayed with an old school mohair wool and a nice gray blue. And then for you builders out there, a lot of times people will use the leather on the welting around the door. Don't. It creates so many squeaks because back and forth, and it really sucks. So more and more we've been using the headliner material, and it quiets things down. Of course, as you can see in all the footage of the build process, inside of the doors are copious layers of Dynamat. On the floors are 5 different layers of heat and sound deadening products, upon which we put the Rolls-Royce Wilton wool carpet, and then another set of that carpet as removable rubber-backed mats with another layer of Dynamat, and then those are hemmed in the scrap leather from the seats. There's no piping on any of the seats. It's all French stitch, which is more durable, more classic, and I just kind of dig the vibe. We did do 3-point belts for safety. We color matched them to the interior, but you have now 2 3-point belts for the front seated passengers, as well as a center lap, and then 3 more laps in the rear. All the original spring structures from within the seats have been deleted and replaced now with a memory foam. We sculpted the seats, gave them a pattern that's inspired by the original with the little tufts, but isn't really an honest representation of the original because I had already taken many liberties, but I like the look. We did reduce the height of the seat a lot because despite the unique low floor format on these early unibody Hudsons, there's just not much headroom at all. So now with the reduced seat height, you actually have better visibility, and it's way more comfortable. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my crazy videos. Pedro and I spent a lot of extra time on this one because, well, we spent a lot of time on this one. So thanks again. Keep in touch. Any questions, reach out. Old school telephone 818-280-3333. Website is icon4x4.com. Instagram is icon4x4. Thanks again. Peace out. See you on the next one.